What's up, family? As you could probably tell, I am not Bishop Brett Fuller. He was actually in town this weekend, and as it is so close to our move to the Rhino neighborhood, he ministered out of the book of Joshua, chapter 3, verses 8 and then 13 through 17, talking about what it means to stand in the gap. Now, we missed the first portion of the message due to some technical difficulties, but I'm here to catch you up. Bishop opened up with an exhortation and an encouragement on where he sees Hope Valley going and what he sees us growing into, talking about how it is definitely going to be something absolutely amazing and special. Not necessarily better than anything else, but God is doing something very special in the city of Denver with our church. And where you're going to be jumping into this message, Bishop is talking about how the Israelites were first delivered out of Egypt before they got to the point where they would cross the Jordan into the promised land. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
This was a God who decided to make Egypt an example of what it meant to resist the word of the Lord, and blessed you in the process. 10 miracles happened in Egypt that allowed the Israelites to become free. And then you had the Red Sea, like if the 10 weren't enough. You get to this impasse whereby everybody's looking at Moses thinking, you are the worst leader on the planet. We leave Egypt, and you don't do anything about vanquishing them. You just make them mad when we leave. Yes. You didn't go to war against them and defeat them. They just said leave, and they were mad. Now they've changed their mind about whether we should have left at all, and they're coming at us with their army. And we have mountains on either side and a big ocean. A massive sea in front of us, and they're behind us. What kind of leader leads us into a box canyon, not thinking that the folks we just left might want us back? Yeah. You're horrible. And they talked about stoning him. Yeah. Give us another leader. Yeah. And Moses, Moses even got a little shook. Now, this part, I barely understand. And I'm not going to be one of those people when they go to heaven who says, when I get to heaven, I'm going to talk to God about some stuff. I'm going to ask him some questions because there's stuff here I just didn't understand. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Really, I'm telling you, not a good idea. Because you generally don't want to ask questions you don't want answers to. Because most of your questions are going to be those that center around, I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve that. Why did that happen to me? And he's going to tell you. You think you're better than you are. You think you didn't deserve it. He might just tell you. Not a good question to ask. And generally speaking, when you get there and you see the nail prints in his hands, you see what happened to his feet, the mark in his side, the last thing you want to do is accuse him of being neglectful or somebody who didn't treat you right. Because all you see is the sacrifice he gave to get you in that home. Wow. To make a place for you eternally. You won't ask any questions. But I still have some inquiry while I'm here. And this one here just gets to me a little bit. So Moses is at the Red Sea, and he calls out to God at the Red Sea. And he says, what am I supposed to do? And God says this, why are you talking to me? I'm thinking, ain't I supposed to talk to you? Who else am I supposed to talk to? Why? God literally says, why are you talking to me? Lift up your staff and fix this thing. Like he's been there before. Like he's been there before. He ain't been there before. He's been other places. He's seen God do some amazing things, but he hadn't been at a Red Sea before. And thought maybe God might just part it and then let us walk across on dry ground. They did that. 2 million people walked across on dry ground. I don't know how that happened. I know it did. But like, wow. Because when you get to the ocean floor, a sea floor, do you know how muddy and damp it is? And how deep it is damp? 20, 30 feet deep damp. How do people walk across? That wind had to be, it was all supernatural. And then you got walls of water on either side. And people just looking and saying, oh, look at that shark. He can't get me. Everybody's just saying, wow. And they're taking out their cell phones and taking selfies, all the way through the promised land. It's just stunning. I'm emphasizing this Because there is no excuse for the way the Israelites treated God in the wilderness. They came upon a place where there was no water, and they looked at Moses and said, what's wrong with you? Why are you leading us in a place where we can't drink? You know mama has to have food and drink for her babies. What's wrong with you? And they got mad at him, and they complained against God. And the Lord showed them water, sometimes water out of a rock, sometimes throwing a stick into a pond. But because they had such a bad attitude, and I know this is foreign to you, I know you never have moments of doubt and unbelief. You never question what God might do or what he needs to do for you to fix whatever's wrong. So just vicariously live through what I'm saying through the Israelites. They had problems. So many problems did they have that God said, I'm not going to let you go where I plan to have you go. This is just ridiculous. You're going to stay here until all of you die. Your children will go, but you won't. 40 years they were in the wilderness. And their children had to deal with the consequences of their parents' disobedience. There's a whole message in that. I beg you, parents, live right. Be examples. Don't make it harder on your children. Build a platform, a springboard for their progress. People of Israel, second generation, are now about to go in the promised land, and they are so excited they don't know what to do. It's been 40 years. And they're all sitting there thinking, man, I wonder what's over there. It's going to be great. And God sets up a plan. He says, I want the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant. And I want them to go into the Jordan. I want you people to stay back. We didn't read all of the passage because it's too long. I want you people to stay back about 1,000 meters or so. Stay back. And I want you to just watch. Just watch what happens. And so the priests were folks that had to carry the Ark of the Covenant in a certain way. So the Ark of the Covenant was this box, about 2 feet high, 2 feet wide, about 18 inches high. It was made of acacia wood, overlaid with gold. On the inside were the 10 Commandments, a jar of manna, which the Israelites used as sustenance throughout the wilderness experience because they could not plant crops. They were nomadic people. So God had to give them food every day. And wherever they were, he just rained down this stuff that they could go out and get in the morning, grind it into grain, grind it into flour, and then make bread from it every morning. Yeah. If they missed the morning harvest, then it evaporated with the morning sun. And so they had to get it in a hurry. But the Israelites didn't even know what it was because God had never provided for anybody in the history of man like he had provided for the Israelites. There was no reference point. And so they walk out and they see this stuff and they literally say, what is it? And that's what manna means. What is it? That's how they were provided for. But as they went into the promised land, they weren't going to have that provision every day. Now they were going to have to take from that which the promised land produced. And they were excited about planting and harvesting and seeing what God had already prepared as other people had planted and harvested. And he said, I want you to watch what the priests are going to do. And these priests would take this box, this Ark of the Covenant, and there were two rings on either corner of the top. And a pole fit through either side. Pole through both of these rings and pole through both of these rings. At the end of the poles, they were long enough for a man to sit there and put it on his shoulder. And so you had 4 priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant. The River Jordan was at flood stage at this time. And the water that filled the Jordan was coming from the mountains. So you understand a little bit about mountain water. Is it warm? Okay, so I'm just laying out the circumstances so you understand what these priests got to go through. Because when I talk about how important it is for you to stand, you need to identify. Come on. So there's cold water coming down, and it's overflowing the banks. And God said, I want the priests who are carrying the ark to put their feet in the water. Now, there were no galoshes in that day. I'm just letting you know. There were no rubber boots, no waders up to here. They had sandals. That's it. And the priests were to go to the River Jordan with the ark and stand in the water and watch God do a miracle whereby the waters would be cut off and everybody would go across. They were really excited because they were going to participate in a miracle. They were going to be a part of this thing. So the priests start carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and they said, man, it's going to be great. We're going to tell our children about this. It's going to be so amazing, man. And all four of them dip their feet right in the water. And you stand there for about 10 minutes. Now, this isn't in the Bible, but I know this happened. I know this happened. One guy says to another, "Hey, dude, I thought the water was supposed to dry up. The water's still here. It's still what? How, are you sure Joshua heard right? I'm just saying." An hour later, dude, my feet are cold. They're turning blue. What are you? I don't see the water. I don't see the. They had to stand, and stand in cold water. I don't know if this is where the phrase came from, cold feet. But it might be. When it's time to figure out how in the world we need to get people who aren't here. They need to come into the land of their promises. It's always going to take somebody who's willing to stand in some cold water for a little bit. And intercede and stand longer than you want to. Be so uncomfortable that your feet get numb. There's nothing convenient about the kingdom, people. And you, as a wonderful congregation, are simply seed. You're the beginning of something. And you have no idea how hard the people who came here, of which there are about 10 left. Am I close? 15? 15 people left. How hard they have worked to produce this. They've been standing for 3 years trying to figure out how in the world to help you cross over on dry ground. Now, why did they have to stand if God said the water was going to dry up? God said the water was going to dry up. But if you read it real carefully, he told them where it was going to dry up. He said a place called Adam, which was across from Zarethan. Well, if you look at the place at which the Israelites were to cross, and where Adam was 11 miles upstream. 11 miles upstream. So it stopped 11 miles upstream. If the water's flowing at a meandering pace of 2 miles an hour, how long do these men have to stand? 5.5. And they're not seeing a thing. Oh, when you stand in the beginning, you won't see any results. That's great. You'll think, I'm wasting my time. I'm working here and nobody's coming. I don't know if you've had the privilege of orchestrating a meeting where nobody showed up. I've done a bunch of those. Standing in the environment of discomfort, waiting for people to cross over into what I've created, and they don't show. Not even the members showed. Oh, you get mad and you think, I ain't doing that again. And you quit standing. The circumstances are just too cold. It's not warm enough of an environment for you to continue to believe what God said. And that's what they had to do while they were in that river. What did God say? That's great. God said, I will do this, you do that. It doesn't matter how long you have to stand if God said he was going to do it. He just needs you to stand. And he will give you strength and perseverance so that you can do it well. But if you get out, those waters would stop way upriver, get to flow again, and you never see what God said. Wow. I want to encourage you that you have the privilege of being inconvenienced with the opportunity to stand in uncomfortable environments in order to see a city won. Are you listening to me? Yes, but you got to hear the word of the Lord. They had to hold on to what God said, even when it didn't look like anything was happening. It probably took a couple of hours for them to see any difference in the recession of the water from the banks. Yeah. A couple of hours, maybe 3. And they're sitting there thinking, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. Joshua must have misheard. It's not, I've been here 3 hours.
That's right.
When is it going to stop? God always takes a little bit longer than our schedule. Wow. He's not on your timetable. He's never been on mine. Ever. I had some really good ideas for God to follow. He didn't choose any of them. None of them. Do you know how long it took us to get our first building? Wow. This is really depressing. We got there in 82. We didn't meet in our first own building until 2007. 25 years of nomadic life as a people. I don't know how in the world we grew. It made no sense. Some people during our history had no idea where we were going to be the next Sunday. That's truth. We met in 33 different locations. Those are only the ones I can remember. 33 different locations. And sometimes we met in a hotel that only gave us like 3 weeks at a time. And then we'd have to go find someplace else and then come back to this place that gave us 3 weeks at a time. And one time we showed up at the Capitol Hill Holiday Inn, and we had a contract with them, but they had secured somebody else who would pay more money for the time we were in, and they said, bye, you're not here this Sunday. That's how inhospitably we were treated. Yet we did not complain. We were saying, Lord, we're grateful. We're grateful that you give us even an opportunity to be inconvenienced with your mission. Wow. We're happy about it. And I was the guy, the set up and break down guy. For 5 years, all the equipment was, cold, very cold. It's very cold. All the equipment was in my bedroom, in my closet. The amplifiers, the speakers, the mics, everything was in my closet. And I would get up at 5 a.m., load the truck, take it to the place where we were meeting, do all the stuff. I was in the praise and worship group. I was a full-time minister, finish the meeting, counsel, break down, take it back to, it was an all-day affair. My feet got really cold. For years. For years. Until the people could cross. I don't want anybody to have my story. It's too long, it's too slow, and it's too hard. But that we got to where we are is a miracle. And I'm grateful to God every day. We planted 14 congregations. We got 7,000 people coming at Easter and 3,700 on a weekend. I got some of the finest people on the planet who work with me. I got kids like David and Megan. I got grandkids that are their children. I have relationships that just can't be broken. I've been walking with some people for 40 years, and we've given one another more than enough opportunity to say bye. We've hurt one another deeply, but we're still here. I wouldn't want anybody to have my journey because it's been slow and long and hard. And my feet have gotten really cold. But all the people who have crossed, boy, it's been worth it. It's been so worth it. It's been so worth it, and I'd do it all over again, even if it was harder. We had to stand on the word. They had to stand on the word. God said a church was to be birthed in Denver. Yes. They had to stand on that word. Yes. Even if it didn't look like it was fast enough, didn't look like we were having enough people, didn't look like the plan was good enough, the strategy was too slow. They stood. Yeah. As the water receded, it says the people began to cross. And somehow they crossed on dry ground. I don't know how. I don't know. That dry ground thing is just a mystery to me. God has to supernaturally dry up a river for it not to be muddy. But that's what happened. And it was such a miracle, such an amazing moment that the Lord had the children of Israel go back to the river, pick up stones, set them in a spot, and make it a memorial moment. Because look at what the Lord did for us in our generation. Your parents experienced amazing things, But this is what you get to remember. What God did for you.
That's great.
And the Lord is going to do this for you all in amazing ways. If you will stand. Stand. And there's, again, not much glory when you're standing in children's ministry. I mean, you don't even know who the people are, most of y'all. But they're providing excellent care, covenantal care for your children.
Yes.
And they're standing every day.
Yes.
Sound folks,
Yes.
they're standing every day to try to make sure that you can hear and receive without distraction as best they possibly can. Thank you, guys. Thank you, ladies, for all you do back there to make sure that the word can get out. You are the version of Peter's boat. Jesus had the crowds at the shore, and he realized he needed to speak to them. It says he borrowed Peter's boat, and he pushed out from shore a little way and began to speak.
Yeah.
Why? Because water is a sound amplifier.
Yeah.
When you speak, it bounces right off the water and people can hear. So that was Jesus' very natural amplification, his microphone. They are Peter's boat.
Come on.
So many people are standing, not to mention David and Megan and Andrew and all their kids, and everybody is standing. I want to ask you if you would stand with this church.
Thank you, Lord.
David mentioned that we have church in 3 languages in D.C. We do. And most people who would look at me would think, well, he must have a black church. Yeah, that's what black people have. They have black church. But we surprise people. If you hadn't noticed, David and Megan aren't black. We have a Korean congregation, pastor on staff. We have 2 Latino congregations, pastor on staff. We planted a church in Vietnam with the Vietnamese, both in Hanoi, started in Ho Chi Minh City, and then it went to Hanoi. And there are 1,000 young people. We planted with the Vietnamese. We won them at George Washington University. He came over as a refugee in 1973. And he went back almost 20 years later and planted our first congregation there. And that was in 2000. 23 years old and is doing fabulous. We wanted to stand in a certain way that what we produced looked like something that people could mirror heaven as. You want to know what heaven looks like? This.
Come on.
No, it doesn't mean that homogeneous congregations are bad. They're wonderful. Thank God for them. Generally speaking, if you're in Korea, you're going to minister to Koreans. They are not a multi-ethnic people over there very much. It's just Koreans. And if you're in downtown Detroit, it's probably going to be all black. And so homogeneity, there's nothing wrong with it. The first church in Jerusalem, all Jewish. Paul was the guy, even though Peter got Revelation 2, Paul was the guy who was a propagator of seeing people like us who aren't Jewish in the kingdom. That was a new idea. We consider it an old idea, a normal idea. With Paul and his generation, brand new that folks like us could actually come in the kingdom. In fact, it was a radical idea that was fought by many of the Jewish people. What I'm trying to communicate is something about the kingdom ought to be reflected in a multi-diverse community, a multi-ethnic community. And what's happening in D.C. was replicated here. Paul went to Antioch, as I stop. He was brought there by Barnabas. Barnabas, happened to be Joseph, was a man who started a giving revival in the church in Jerusalem in Acts chapter 5. An amazing guy. Barnabas wasn't one of the 12, but he probably was one of the 120 that was there on the day of Pentecost. And he knew this guy named Saul. He was a different guy, Saul was. Saul was out there doing stuff in Christianity that nobody was doing. Barnabas went to Antioch to try to figure out what the Christians were doing in Antioch. Barnabas saw the diversity in Antioch. There was Simon of Cyrene. This was the dude who carried, we believe, Jesus' cross. And they called him Niger.
Yes.
Do you know what Niger means?
Yes.
Black.
Yes.
So when they saw Simon, they said, hey, black man. Barnabas walked in. He saw Simon. He said, you got black folk?
Yes.
You got black folk in the church? There's a guy named Lucius. Any man with a name Lucius got to be black. I'm sorry. White folk couldn't get away with that, but I can. Antioch was so diverse that Barnabas said, I know a guy. I know a guy who needs to get here because he needs to see what the Lord is doing. He brought in Saul. And after they were there for a little bit, God said, separate Saul and Barnabas for the work to which I've called them. And that began the expansion of the gospel to the Gentiles because they saw something.
Yes.
They experienced how it was working naturally and organically. And he said, I'm going to take a little bit of that sourdough recipe and bring it over here.
Come on.
Everybody knows sourdough, right?
Yes.
You got to get a little something from somebody else in order to make yours.
Yes.
They took sourdough from our house.
Yes. Come on.
And that's how you all got here.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
And that's why I said in the beginning, this church is different.
Yes.
And it is set for greatness. Stand and watch who God will bring.
Yes.
Father in heaven, thank you for your goodness and grace. We're grateful for your help. You treat us better than we deserve.